All right, friends, welcome. It is week 9. This is our lecture. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get in. We got a pretty big one today, so we're gonna fly through quite a bit of stuff. Um, don't forget your discussion question and core assignment this week. If we look at the project, we need our users. Oh, sorry. Now we're week 9. I actually don't even know that you have a core assignment due this week. You don't. You just have
I
users
don't think we
CR
do, yeah.
practice. Yeah. So you do have a
So this
core,
would be a really,
Yay.
I was gonna
great
say
week
this
to
would be
catch
a
up.
really good, yeah, I was gonna say this would be a really good week for catching up if you're
Yeah,
behind. Yeah.
exactly. So we've got, you just have one discussion question and no core assignment due this week.
Right.
Cool. So what we're doing today is we are going to enter into, on the actual platform itself, we're entering into this Flask plus MySQL connection. So we are beginning the process of our full stack application. So that way we are really going to have a front end, a back end, and a database that we're connecting to. And all of these things are going to really kind of work together. Today we're going to build out, create, and read. Next week, we're going to modularize this. So we're going to break out some of the structure. And then we're going to do update and delete. And then we'll continue on kind of building with validations, with some encryption. So we're going to kind of start really building. This is the beginning of us starting to prepare to build our actual exam or to build something that's similar to an exam. So we're going to kind of go back a little bit and we're going to go back to MySQL workbench. We're going to create 2 things. We're only going to really deal with one at the moment. Actually, we're just going to deal with one. How do I want to do this? We'll create 2 things. We're going to create a one-to-many relationship that, well, let's look real fast. No, we're going to do create and read. We're just going to build that out. And then we'll kind of start our one-to-many relationship, redo that this week, week 11, and then we'll build on that. So that's what we'll do. So we'll just keep this separate. So we can build anything we want. We've built movies before, but there's a million other things we can build. Does anybody have a desire to build something specific? We want to build a food truck. Do we want to build movies, a band website? Kind of be able to think of just entities we could save into a database.
Something that has to do with games.
Okay, what kind of games would you like?
How about PlayStation?
Okay, so we're gonna build out PlayStation games. Estrella, what do you think about that?
Sure.
I mean,
It's
Sure.
if you have
no,
something different in mind, that's fine.
no. I kind of listened to what Will was saying. He was talking about a food truck, and I was just like, really, a food truck? I I don't know how that connects with it when you said it, but I was just like, okay,
Yeah,
I'll roll with it.
we can do a game. What kind of attributes would we have in our game? Just so I'm making sure that we're hitting all the pieces. Probably have a title, maybe
Yeah. Release
a
date.
release date. We would have a rating. We would have the
Yeah.
company behind it, the development company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that should work. That should work just fine. And then maybe we'll just create video games, and then maybe we can have a console as well if we have Xbox or PC or cross-platform or whatever that is. Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm gonna create a new model, and we're gonna go to my game, and I'm gonna call this game DB. Cool. Now let's go ahead and let's go ahead and create this diagram. If you guys remember, the way that what we're doing is we're creating just sort of this entity in my database. And so I'm going to place a new table. And this is going to be my game, right? So I'm going to say games.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have quite a few different columns, right? So can you remember that we need an ID? That's going to be an integer.
Auto increment.
Yep, and we auto increment I, absolutely. We're going to have a game title. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
say title. Let's go, not 45, let's go 90. We'll have
game rating,
Rating, yep. And then
release.
we can do that. So date gets a little weird, and I think it's probably too advanced for this. Because dealing with date time can be a little bit of a confusion. So let's save on date, but we could do
Maybe
we could say
release year.
we could do release year. What if we just did like platform? Because we just need really like 4. So we could say platform.
Yeah, platform.
And then we could do the 45 is fine. And then maybe lastly, we do development company.
Yeah.
What is it called? It's not a development company. It's what's a development company, but studio.
Oh, I was gonna say software.
We'll say development studio. That's really what it's called. Like Bungie and all that good stuff. We'll do this 105, just in case. Cool. So we've got an ID, a title, a rating, platform, development studio. What are the 2 other things I need to have?
Created at and updated at.
Yep. Created at and updated at. I need to go ahead and change some of this.
I was gonna
And
say with the platform, certain games are available for like multiple different systems.
mhm.
So maybe for some of the games, we could just select one of the systems that it's available for or something.
Yeah, I think we could probably have a category called cross-platform. And so
Okay.
you could do it for PC or and what I'm envisioning is like Nintendo, Xbox, PS5, PC, or cross-platform just means it's on
Okay.
multiple. Cool. Do you remember what data type these are? They're created at?
Timestamps.
Yeah, date time.
Oh, daytime. Sorry.
Nope, you're good. Date time. And then there's that little thing we could do here. Just as a reminder, if I right click, I get that cell and I
Oh,
right
the
click on it,
current.
I can do current timestamp. And then on update, we do the one that says on update. And now this handles it to me. So when I'm actually creating these entities, I don't have to pass a timestamp. It's going to automatically do it for me. So it takes a little bit of pressure off of me. Okay. Ooh. So I've got a game. So games, where I've got an int ID, title, rating, platform, development studio, create and update it at. I think this looks awesome. Cool. So now that that's done, we're going to go to my database and we're going to forward engineer this, right? I want to create this in my database. I click next. I click next. Okay. Next. This is the code that it's creating for me. Click next. I get my 4 check marks. We know we're good. Okay. I can file, save model. Cool. I'll save it in there. I'll put game DB file. Okay. So now that that's done, if I go to my actual local instance and I refresh this, I now have my game DB. It's got a table for games. And now we're chilling, right? It's got all my columns. We're good to go. So I can put this away for right now. Put this away. Cool. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to build out a Flask application. And so there's a couple things I need in order for that to work. I need my, what file kind of is everything in Flask?
The server.
Yeah, exactly. Server.py.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is my folder called whenever I want my HTML?
Templates.
Exactly. So I have my templates folder. And
I was
then,
wondering,
go ahead.
yeah, I was wondering maybe we could put statics for like CSS. I mean, I know I don't know. It's
We
just
could.
it's easier to do Bootstrap, but it's just one of the things that I noticed about CSS is it just seems to be a little bit more versatile in what it can do.
Sure,
And
I'm
maybe
not
maybe
going.
that's because I don't
Yeah,
really know all that much about Bootstrap, but I actually
yeah,
figured out how to do the statics template and to add CSS files to the statics, and it seems to, you know, do a
yeah.
little bit more.
So
I don't
yeah, so if you want to do that, you're welcome to. I'm not going to because I will just use Bootstrap. The whole point of this is just to do the functionality, so I'm not even going to focus really on what
know.
it looks
Okay.
like. But yeah, for your exam,
Okay.
you're welcome to put a statics folder in your static files there. Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to kind of follow this. What do we need to do if we are dealing with Flask? Well, first off, I need to create a new terminal. I'm in my week 9. This is a brand new folder, so I need to say pip env shell. I need to create this environment for me. It's creating my virtual environment. Cool. So it's created that. And I can see here because it says pip env. And when we are dealing with this, we're going to be now connecting the two. We're going to connect MySQL to our Flask project. And so the way we do that is we now need a new library that we're bringing in called PyMySQL. And this can be found in the overview section. And so what I'm actually going to do is this, right? Is I'm going to run this pipenv install. And remember, you can do multiple libraries by just putting a space in between. So let's go to that. And so I'm going to say pip env install. And then what I'm going to install is py. And let's look here. It's capital P, capital M, capital SQL. And then I'm going to install Flask. I'm installing all of these onto my server. Perfect. And you don't have to do this, but I like to just say pip list after. What pip list does is it says, okay, here's everything that you currently have. And it makes me know, yep, PyMySQL is in there, and yep, Flask is in there. I'm good to go. Great. So let's go ahead and bring this in and deal with this. What do I do in my server py file? How do I start this?
You would do the from Flask
Yep, from
import
Flask,
Flask
import
Flask.
Flask. Yep, capital F. We'll do that stuff here in just a second. I do my app name, and then I'm going to handle that in here in a second. What do I say at the end? Say if
Underscore name.
remember it's double underscore.
Oh,
If
okay.
dunder name equals main app.run
Okay.
debug's true. So this is kind of the completion of my Flask setup right now, right? I haven't done anything with routing. I need to do that. But this is the end of my server py. Or my server py, this is kind of it. Let's go ahead and create our first route. Let's just create our home route, and then we'll need to create our index file. So I'm going to say my decorator of app.route and whatever my route is. And then let's just say def index. And we can get it to say, let's just say hello world. Let's spin up our server and make sure it's even running. It's always a good thing. So I say Python server.py. It says it's up and running. So we go here and we say local host 5000. It says hello world. Okay, our code is working. Great. Now, we've established, okay, we need to have this PyMySQL in order for us to kind of enter into this full stack ability in order for us to connect our database together. So let's kind of go over what we have to do in order to do that. there's a file we're going to have to put in our project that basically lays out the connection for us. So we've already done that. And here is my file. So what I'm going to do is in my project, on the same level of server, I'm going to say my SQL connection .py. That's here, my SQL connection .py. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to come here, and I'm going to paste. The good news is you do not have to change any of this. You just copy and paste and then you're good to go. Now, actually, I lied. There's one change you have to do. And we'll walk through what this is here in just a second. If you notice, we have this PyMySQL Connect. It's got this user and password. If I'm looking at my SQL, I don't know where it's at. I might have canceled it. My SQL, I've got, yeah, I think I closed it. My user is root and then my password is root. If you've got anything other than that, if you said that your username was not root, but it was something else when you were setting it up, or you change your password, you'll need to put that here. You'll need to put that here. So other than that, you don't have to touch this file. What this is doing is you see this constructor, it's establishing a connection to our database. The connection is just basically does this and says connect, where we go to and we're connecting to our local host. We're going to route, here's our password, and it establishes this connection. Again, your server has to be running as well for this to work. So basically it should be running in the background, but if it's not working, maybe just try opening MySQL Workbench and it should work there. And then we've got this self.connection equals connection. Cool. So it's saying, great, this connection attribute is this guy right here. Now, what that's doing is that's kind of setting up. This is my class of MySQL connection. It's not super important that you know this, but I like to kind of walk through just so that way you have a little bit of an understanding. We're going to use this quite a bit, where we're going to query our DB that takes in a string, which we're going to create, and then a dictionary that by default is none, or if we pass in some information, then it will then it'll kind of take the place of that, which we'll see when we create. And what it's doing is it is running our queries onto our database. It is using the PyMySQL library that's got some different methods in there, like this method here, this method here. And so it is actually inserting, or it is doing our queries for us, right? So it's kind of doing some of the heavy lifting. We still have to write the query in a well-mannered way, but it is basically executing onto my database, adding or subtracting or doing whatever we need to our database. And then it returns, or it closes our connection, because we don't want to just always keep it open. And then it returns the result, or it returns the last row ID. It returns quite a few things. Depends on our query. Again, not super important. Just wanted to make sure that you guys were in the know there. And then we have this connect to MySQL. That really, all that is just saying, hey, let's have an established connection to my database. But this file is something we're going to have to use. We're going to have to bring in. And again, all you have to do is copy it from the platform. This file will be the file you use for the entire cohort. So you don't have to change it. If you just, the only thing you'll have to change is this portion right here. And so just make sure that is good to go. Cool. So we're able to connect to our database, right? We have this file. We're good to go. Now, what we need to do is I want to create and allow my users to create a new video game, right? That we could put the development studio, we can put all sorts of stuff. Um, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a model or a class for what my video game should look like. So if you remember back all the way with OOP, when we were dealing with classes, we're going to go do that same thing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file. It's called video game. Oops. Video game.py. And this is going to be my video game class that has all the information that we've established in our database. Now, before I do that, I'll need to be able to talk to my database because here's where my queries are going to be. So I need to establish a connection. Way I can do that is I can say from my SQL connection, import connect to MySQL. Now what that's going to do is that's going to go into this file and it's going to get this one, grab this and allow me to establish a connection to my database. We'll see when it establishes that here in a bit. You do not have to touch this again. Once you change the user and the root, you don't have to touch this file. Go ahead and get rid of it. Cool. So what I want to do is I want to create this class of video game that's going to have different attributes, right? So we're going to say def init. We take in self and data. Remember, this just allows us to deal with this specific entity of the video game. We've got an ID, which all of our video games are going to have an ID. They're going to have a title, a genre. I need to open my SQL workbench just so I can make sure that we're good to go. Let's open this up one more time to GameDB, tables, games, columns. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this and let's do this. Perfect. Cool. So let's make sure we've got ID title, cool. We don't even have genre. So let's get rid of this. I guess we could have had genre. That would have been kind of nice. That's okay. We have rating, and they don't have to be in order. It just is nice. It kind of makes it more kind of succinct. It's going to be self.platform equals data platform. And then we called it development studio. So we say self.develop. I guess developer would have been better, but here we are. Development studio equals data development studio. Cool. We have title or ID, title, rating, platform, development studio, created at, updated at. Great. We've established and created our model. Again, I'm going to click out of this because we don't need it. Or we'll do it here in a bit. Cool. Great. Now I've established my class. Right? I'll need to be able to create this. Or I want my users to be able to create this or anybody on my platform. So what am I going to do in order for my users to create it? How do I get that information from them?
What do you mean? Well, like from what you have created on the SQL?
So yeah, so I want my users to be able to interact with my website to create a video game. What do we use? What kind of development tools do we use in order for our users to interact with us and fill out stuff or create something? Like let's take we've established the database portion, right? So we've established the back end. Now, for it to be full stack, it's kind of three portions, right? It's back end, it's front end, and it's the database. So we've done this database. What makes the most sense for us to build now?
See the route.
The route, yeah. So we can build the route. That's fine. So we have this index hello world, but let's go ahead and get rid of that. I want it to go to maybe a HTML file, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm going to bring in render template. Get all these. Cool. I'm going to bring in render template. And then maybe I want it to render template index.html. And we don't have that built yet, right? So I would say it makes a little bit more sense before we start building out the functionality. Let's build out the front end, what my user sees. So then we can say, okay, we have that built. I can grab data from it. We're good to go. And we can kind of test it a little bit versus having to build it, then go to the front end. So let's go build this index.html. So I'm going to my templates. I'm going to create this index.html. Cool. Exclamation point. What if I put in? Ooh, I don't know if that's going to work. We'll try it though. Okay. So I'm going to say dot container. And I'm just going to do an H1 that says, welcome to Video Game Palace. Let's go see if this works. So this is still running. Let's come here, refresh. Yep. So we get welcome to Video Game Palace. Awesome. So we should, what way can I grab information from my user? What HTML elements can I use to get information from my user? How does the user communicate to us? How do we do it with session? How do we get information from the front end to the back end with session and put it in session? Or even Ninja Gold.
That was
So
fun, by the way.
we write form.
Yeah, it's a
Form tag?
form, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's a
form
form.
tag.
Yeah, so we're gonna use a form. So I'm gonna say div. I want it to be column medium 6. And I'm gonna create a form that's gonna be of type post, right? Because I'm grabbing information.
Yeah.
Cool. Now this action is what route I want to send it to. So we haven't created this, right? That's just gonna be in my server. All we have is this current route. So what should we call it? Should we say create game? That sounds fine. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this not do its thing. But I'm going to say form group. And that's going to be a label of title, form control. And I know I've got a couple different ones, right? I've got title, I've got, and we can even just look at video game. Title, rating. We've got something for platform and development studio. Cool. Remember the created at, updated at, those are created because at the beginning, whenever we created our database, we had that default expression, so we don't have to worry about it. And then again, ID is something that's already created by the database. We don't have to worry about it. So really these 4 is what we need our user to give us in order to create a video game, right? Does that make sense? Kind of pause in there.
Say that one more time, Will.
Yeah, so I'm needing to create a form so I can actually get my user to create a video game. We have 7 attributes in my class. ID though, I don't need them to put in an ID because that auto increments from MySQL, right? Because we clicked the little AI, so it's automatically going to do it for me. because we did the default expressions on MySQL, when we, sorry, it's not that. When we had, the current timestamps and current timestamps on update current timestamps, because we did that, we don't have to worry about this either. So really, in order for us to create something, these two are already done. This one's already done. So really, I just need these four, right? Or sorry, highlighted ID, just these four.
Okay, got it.
Because automatically it's handling ID, created at, and updated at. So I'm going to put in title. Here, I'm going to change this to rating. Say rating. Here, I'm going to say we have platform. And then the last one is I've got development studio. Cool. And then maybe I'll just say studio. I can do development studio. And this one was platform. Okay. And then lastly, I need a button. So button dot btn dot b primary is going to get me a nice blue button. Cool. And create game. Cool. So let's go check this out. If I refresh, we've now got this. Perfect. I'm going to say, oh, that's why. Just wondering. It was not within my container. So my container div ended right here. I was wondering, I was like, why is this offset and then this is not? I just had my div already closed. And so I made it a little bit smaller and put it within my container. And so that moved it over and then made it a little bit smaller. But now I've got my entire form to create a video game. So we have said that when this is submitted, what does it do? I guess I'll ask you guys. When somebody says create game, what happens? What does my computer do?
It should create a profile for them or for that game that they're creating.
Sorry, my dog was at my feet. Yeah, so it is going to create a game, but where's it go? I'm sorry, Estrella.
Well, you have to create the session, no?
I'm not doing anything in session.
Okay.
It goes in the server.
It goes
.py.
where?
In the server.py, are we gonna create like an app.route?
Yeah, exactly. And what's that route going to be?
It's gonna be our HTML. It's gonna be, let me see, index.html. What do we connect in there?
So this is our index. That's what we just created.
Oh yeah, the
So
create,
when we click this create game button,
yes.
where is it going to go?
So it's gonna go to server.py.
Uh-huh. And what's it going to look for?
It's gonna look for app.route, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then is it create game?
Exactly. It's going to look for this, right?
Yes, that's yeah.
Yeah. This is, I will say this a lot moving forward. It makes the most sense and it's going to help you when you are debugging to think about, okay, where's the computer going next, right? Kind of what's the process? Think about it as like a list of instructions. Estrella was showing me there's this cool thing that says like, okay, take a step. And then you kind of have to list out every instruction it's good to think about how the computer works that way to help problem solve. So when this button's clicked, it's going to bundle this information, right? We're making a request, and it's going to look for this route here, and it's going to say, hey, I have this request, right? If it can find it, it says, hey, I have this request. So let's go ahead and create that. So I'm going to say at app route. My route is going to be create game. Now, it is a post request because it's a form. Because it's a form, we are taking in, and it is a post request, right? Here, method post. We have to put that in my form or in my route, or else it's not gonna, it's a request, right? And this is the request method. If it doesn't have that, it's not gonna work. So now what we can do is I can say def create game. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of print request.form. I want to see that information that we're getting, and then let's return redirect, because we always redirect on a post request. Always, always, always. Let's redirect back, right? So if I save this and I say Halo, Xbox, and Bungie, the original OG, I create game. So I can't be reached. Means my server broke. Oh, my server's not on. Okay, let's go back. Refresh this. Cancel. Refresh. Okay, so I'm gonna say Halo, Xbox. Ooh, not ZBoss. That's funny. And Bungie. I said create game. Cool. If we go look at our actual terminal, we see that we get this dictionary of these values, right? And these values are connected directly to the name of my input, right? So I have title, and it was Halo. Rating, rating. Platform, development studio. So what we now need to do, we're able to see this, right? We're able to see, okay, we're able to grab information. What I want to do is I want to break this down and break this out. Now, I'll show you another way we can do it. And for right now, that other ways are going to be fine. But when we get to like hashing passwords and encrypting stuff, you're going to have to do it this way anyway. So I would just say, get used to doing this when you're dealing with forms. So we're going to break this out and we're going to say data. And this could be anything you want it, right? Data can be anything. It could be unicorn if you wanted. But we're going to create this dictionary with my values. So I'm going to say title. And this is going to be from request.form title. I'm going to say rating. Request.form rating. I've got platform. And then lastly, I've got, oh, ChatGPT is awful today. Lastly, I've got development studio. Request.form development studio. Now, if I just print data, let's fill it out again and just see what happens. Make sure that's running. Say Halo, Xbox, and then we say Bungie. Create game. We come back here. Now you can see that instead of this immutable multi-dict full of tuples, we just get this object or this dictionary with all my information, my key value pairs of all my values here. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions about what we've done so far? Most everything except the class building, but everything we've done in server PY and the index HTML should be normal. That should be what we've always done. But are there any questions?
Okay, on your terminal, can you go scroll up to see the difference if you can show?
Yeah. So this is my immutable multi-dict, which is a which is full of tuples. Right here, tuples, remember, are kind of like lists, but they're immutable. Here is just a dictionary with keys and values.
Okay.
That's not super important. I'll show you why it's not super duper important in a bit. But just know that this is the process we should do. Okay. So we've connected to a database. We've created this. And what we need to do now is actually say, okay, I've connected to a database. I need to build out the functionality for my video game to actually save in my database. And so what we're going to do is we're going to head over to my video game PY. And then what I'm going to build is a class method. This is going to be called def create game. I know it's there, but I'm just going to type it. It is a class method, so it takes in CLS. And this one is taking in data, right? Because I need to give my data. Once my request is sent from my index and my server gets it, it says, okay, I now need to give that request over to my database. I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to just kind of show you what's happening real quickly. So here's our front end. Here's our back end. And here's our database, right? When we fill out this form, we're going and making a request from our front end to our back end, right? And sometimes our back end has that information, or if we're making any sort of request, has the information, and it can just send a response back quickly. And it doesn't have to involve the database at all. Now, what we're doing here when we're creating, or we're going to be getting all of our video games, is our server gets this request. And then it says, okay, I need some more information, or my user's trying to create a new video game. I need to talk to my database. So it bundles that request and sends it to my database. And I'll type this. So my database is going to do something, right? It's going to either create or see if it can give you or give that request back. Or see, okay, you've made a request. Do I have something back? If it does, it's going to give back a value. Right? It's going to do that thing. It's going to create, and it's going to give back a value to my backend. And my backend takes that response and then gives it to my front end. Does that make sense? So this is our HTML. This is my HTML. This is my server PY. And then this is my DB. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Very much so.
Cool.
So, where does the videogame.py fall into this structure that you made?
Yep, you'll see here in just a second. So I'll actually leave this up so that way I can show you. So what we're doing is we're creating a class method. And so these are the things that I can do with just a video game. Where I'm saying, okay, I want to be able to create a game. And it takes in CLS because it's a class instance. So it always takes in CLS. And in this case, it's taking in data because it's saying, hey, in order for me to take a video game or create one, I need the data for it, right? I need to know what the title is, the rating, the development studio. I need to know all that information, right? Then what we're doing is we are creating a query, or this variable called query. This could be anything, keep it query, but it could be unicorn or cupcake. It doesn't matter. And here we're writing our actual SQL query. Now, give me just 1 second. I'll make this Cool. This is our actual query here itself. Now it's a little wrong, so I'm going to change it real fast. Because this is saying we are passing in, actually I'll keep it here for just a second, that we are passing in created at and updated at. And the way you do that is you say this now and now, right? Remember, because we did the current timestamp and on update current timestamp, that default expression, we don't have to do this. That said, if you didn't do that, I just did this with a student the other day. If you don't do the default expression, you have to pass this in and then call it here. So let's break down this query real fast. We're saying we're going to insert into video games. So let's pull up my SQL Workbench and make sure that's even what it's called. Move this over. We called this games. So this is the first and foremost, right? We just called this games. So we need to change this. We're saying into my games table. And these values for title, rating, platform, development studio, which are, if I look here, we've got title, rating, platform, development studio. Perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete these two because we don't need them. And what we're saying is the values we want to pass in are title, rating, platform, development studio. And then in this case, again, we had the now, but we don't need that. Now let's pause here. What this is doing here. And so this is establishing and saying, hey, there are some attributes or some columns in my games table, title, rating, platform, development studio that I want to insert into, right? The values portion here is percentage, the name of it in a parenthesis, and then the S after. And this is preventing SQL injection. And so what typically happened, or what could happen, or what has happened in the past, is that people have filled out a form and maybe they said something like, let me go to my, here, they'd say like, drop all from and they would do something like this, right? And so this would run an actual SQL query and it would delete all users or all values from users. And so this is called SQL injection. And so what we want to do is we want to prevent that from being read that way, because SQL is going to read this because it's got this colon. It's going to read this as a new SQL kind of statement, if you will. And so what we do is we say, okay, I want to pass in my information. And this way, this is another way, sort of like string interpolation, to where if somebody even puts that, their name is going to be drop all users, but it's not going to read it as a query. It's just going to read it as a string. So no matter what, it's a way to prevent our users from putting nefarious things into our database. So a whole bunch about SQL injection on the platform that I encourage you to read. It's not super necessary, but if you would like to learn more, it's on there. So this is just my query, right? Insert into games. We've kind of done this before, but we just put the value here. We didn't kind of connect the two. Now, one thing I really want to note is when we have these values here, this is coming from my data, right? And so we have to make sure that this matches, that my keys match. If I had this called some title or one title, or, you know, just game studio, it's not going to know what development studio is, right? So we have to make sure that that matches. So these should be the same as my keys that I'm passing here. Cool. Then what's happening here is I am creating a variable. There's kind of two ways we could do this. This connect to MySQL. Remember, we brought that in up top. It connects to, and this is my actual database name. So we want to check that because that's not my database name. We call this game_DB. So let's go change that. So it's connecting to my game_DB. Then it's running this query DB that's passing in this query and the data that I gave this value. So it's going to come into here, and then we're going to walk through exactly what our entire computer is doing when we pressed it. We'll walk through that step by step. It's coming in here and it's running this. And so it's saying, hey, if it's insert, which is what we're doing, right? Then what it's going to give back and it returns is the ID of the item that you just created. So that's why here, this says game ID if we wanted to keep that ID. What you could also do, if you don't care about getting that ID immediately, is you could just say something like this. This will do the same thing. This will do the same thing. And so now what we can actually do is send something to my database. So we can actually create a value there. So before we do that, let's real quickly walk through what we did and how it works. Read's pretty simple, but I think we'll just save that for Thursday. So we'll do like half of that and then maybe an algorithm for the other half, just because we're approaching time and I want to really make sure we walk through what's happening. Okay. So let's say my user comes here and refreshes and says, Halo E. Now it's cross platform. And then we'll say Bungie, it's 343, all kinds of stuff. Okay. When our user, I'm not going to do it yet, but when we say create game, what it's going to, actually, I'll just do it real fast just to see if it works. Cool. It didn't work, but I'll tell you why here in a second. When we clicked that create game, what it does is we click this button. Then it says, okay, I have this request. Let's go to this route. And it's going to go to my server PY. And it's going to find the route, create game, and it's going to say, okay, great. I have that. What do you want me to do? And we say, okay, run this method here. It says, okay, what does this method do? And it says, all right, make this object or dictionary of data. And we're just printing data. Then I want to redirect back to here and it redirects. So why didn't it actually save in my database? If I go to my database and I refresh, and I look here, if I were to look at this and say, select all from games, and I run this, execute the selector. What's going on here? Oh. Commented out. Silly me. We get nothing, right? There's no values in there. That's because all we told it to do was print our data, all right? We have this cool new query that we created within my class that I now need to call and say, okay, I want you to actually save my data. And so what we do in my server PY is instead of print data, I'm going to say video game, which is the name of my class, dot create game data. Now I'm going to get a squiggly because it's going to say, I don't know what video game is. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top here and we're going to say from, because we have to bring it and give access to, right? So say from video game, and that's because video game is my PY file. I want to import the class. And so what it's doing is it's giving me this class and I get access to all of its methods, right? I can utilize and use that. And so now when it says video game.create game, and let's pause again what we're doing. Once I click the button, it's going to go look for create game, right? I click this button here, boom. It's going to send me to create game. Create game is going to create this dictionary. Then it's going to say, video game class, create game. I need to run that method. So it's going to come and it's going to run this method with the data that I passed it. Data. And it's going to run this. It's going to connect to MySQL. So it's going to establish a connection right here. It's just going to run this, which is this entire class. It's going to create this connection. It then runs this query DB. So it's going to run this and it identifies what's going to happen. It's insert, right? It says, okay, well, what is it? What's the first value here? Oh, it's insert. Okay, cool. I pass in, or sorry, it runs the query DB. I pass in the query. Query DB establishes what it is. It runs it. SQL commit. So it sends my query to my database. It gets something back. It's either going to get me an error or it's going to give me the last ID. And this is done. And that's what is returned, right? So then all of a sudden here, this is done running. And then it redirects me back to my index.html. And in fact, I'm going to say dashboard.html. Oops. And then I'm just going to say, this is where we're going to do our get so we can actually see it. But I'm just going to, for right now, do an H1 that says and dashboard. And we'll do that on Thursday. So again, I'm gonna now take it kind of annotating. We're in my index.html. We're going to make the request to my backend with create game. Create game is going to create this information with data. Then it's going to call video game.create game. So it's going to go into my model. So I'm going to say vg.py to run that method. vg.py, so videogame.py, is going to find what we called. It's going to establish this variable. Then it's going to say connect to MySQL. So it goes into the msql.py and says, hey, I've got this connect to MySQL and query DB. So then it says, okay, you have all that information. What I'm going to do is first, we run this connect to MySQL, which is this MySQL connection. And so it goes here, connects to my database, runs my queries. Once that's done, my database gives information back to this file. Or sorry. Once that's done running, let me undo that. And it returns that information. Where it's returned is in my video game, right here, right? Which immediately goes into a return to my server PY. Which then, once that's done, goes immediately into a return redirect to my HTML. Does that make sense?
Trying to process.
Yeah. Would it help if I walk through it one more time, or is it kind of beating a dead horse at this point?
Please do walk. Do walk.
Yeah,
more
I'll do
time?
it one more time.
Okay, okay. Oops. I'm gonna kind of clean this up a little bit. So that way it's not. And we'll just kind of walk through as the kind of if we. Okay, oops, front in. Okay. So when our user is on our index.html, they're going to have a form, right? They're going to fill out that form. They're going to click that button that takes us to create game, which is in my server.py. So it's going to send that request to server.py right here, right? On line 10. Or it's going to find it on line 9, and then it's going to run this. As this is running, it creates this variable. Then it says, this class instance, or this class, I want to run this method of create game. So this all happens lightning fast. It's going to then run my create game. And by doing that, it's going to go into my video game py, right? And it's going to say, hey, I need to run this create game and I have some data for it. So video game py, it says, it looks, okay, cool. I have this in it. That's fine. Then it looks at your methods and it says, are you create game or whatever I called it? So in this case, we called it create game. And it's going to look through my methods and find it. And once it finds it, it goes, yes, I found it. I have some data for you because here we passed in my data. And so it says, okay, great. This is a class instance data. What do you want me to do? And so we enter into this function here where it first creates this variable called query. And then what we're going to do, and let me actually just do this because I think it actually might be easier if I do this. Just to kind of help us understand. This kind of breaks it down. So it creates this query, and then it says, hey, I've got this variable of game ID, and it's equal to this function call right here. And once that function call is done, this is a chained method. So once this is finished, it goes on and then runs this. But my connect to MySQL is not on this file, right? So then what it does is it goes into your msql.py to go find that function it has to run. So it's going to go into MySQL connection. It finds that function, which returns this MySQL connection with the DB. And so what that's doing is it is then coming up here, creating this, right? Because when we call a class, the constructor runs, right? If you remember back from OOP, when we're creating like a new person, we run the constructor. This is my constructor. So it is establishing this connection and saying, hey, MySQL connection, self.connection equals the connection to my database. Once that's done running, so cool, we've established a new instance of connection. Then we chain this method in my query DB. So then now that I have this connection, I come here and I run this method. That takes in my query. And if I have data, it takes it in. And if not, it's by default none. What this is right here, just so you guys know, is in Python 3, it allows it. is, we've talked about how variables, you don't have to have like a type, like a string or an int. You can though. And so what this is doing is this is saying, hey, this query should be of type string. And this data should be a dictionary. So that's all that's doing. If you're like, why does it say that? Again, you don't have to have that, but that's just what's going on. So it's running query DB. Now it is taking if query.lower.find insert. So what it's actually doing is it's lowercasing everything in my query. So everything in here is lowercase. And it's saying, hey, if you find the word insert, which we know is a creation, right? If you find insert, then I want you to commit this. So basically run this, connect to my database and run it. That's what this is doing. And then it's returning cursor.lastRowID because when we insert queries in MySQL, it returns the ID number of the row we just inserted or the value we just created. So then it's saying, okay, I'm done here. And because this was the last function to run, whatever it returned becomes the value of my variable, which if we just said it returns the ID number of the last thing, the game we just created, we get its ID. And then this returns the game ID to wherever this function was called, which was here. Now I could say game ID. And this will do the same thing. And so what it would do is it would give me the ID, and then I would now have this variable of this new ID that I created. And then we redirect. So then it comes straight here and then it sends us back to the HTML. So that's where our user sees. All our user sees is they fill out the form, they click the button, and then they get sent back to this index.html. What I could do is say like dashboard. And then create this app.route dashboard. That's just a, what we're going to do next week or next on Thursday. Doesn't take in any values. And we're just going to return render template HTML. Yep. Perfect. So now instead of going back to the HTML, it goes straight to my dashboard. Does that make sense? I know it's a lot that we just went over and it's kind of like intricate. I'm sorry I didn't finish the drawing. Just whenever we are here, this is when we connect to our database. Right? Our database returns with the ID that we then pass to here, which then gets passed to here, which then we get rerouted to dashboard, and it sends that back to my user so they get dashboard. So if I run this, and this will be the last thing we do today, I can refresh. I can say Halo, rating is E, platform is cross platform, and then we're going to say Bungie, just because we're faithful to the beginning. We get an error, unknown database, games. Games was my table, right? Let me clear this. Games was my table, and here I called it games. That's my table. It's game underscore DB. So now, because what it was trying to do is connect to MySQL and find the database of game database, but I got an error, right? Because it's saying, hey, the other one doesn't exist. Games doesn't exist. Let's go back here. Come back, refresh, say Halo. Cross platform, and Bungie. Now let's see. Cool. So we're in dashboard. We got redirected. If I look here, we can always know that, okay, if it's running the query, which comes from this, running query plus the query, runs it, that means, okay, we should be good to go. But moment of truth, if I come here and I refresh and then I run this, I now get my database. Right? I now get my new video game. And now it's here. So we've just created our first full stack application with a database, with a back end, with a front end. I know we're 15 minutes over, but I'm happy to help in any way. Are there any questions about anything I can clear up? It's a lot, so we can go back over this on Thursday, and we'll do read as well. But are there any questions on what we did?
I have a question, Will.
Yeah.
So I see under templates, we have dashboard.html and index.html. So index is post, right?
So these are not post. The form itself is post.
Okay. And how about the dashboard.html, which we didn't
So,
cover?
so great question. Only when we're remember that these are just HTTP methods. So I can have on my index.html, I could have a button that still is just a GET request. So it's just, we only label post or GET on the actual method request itself. So because I have a form on my index.html, that form itself is just a post method, but I could have something like this is a perfect example. This is just an A tag that has an href of dashboard. So it's just sending me to my dashboard. And maybe I'll just have this as info. And so if I come here and go back, I've now got this button called dashboard that if I click it, it takes me to dashboard, right? This button, oops. This button is just a GET request. So just really wanted to clarify, it's not the form itself, it's not the HTML or this HTML, that's the post. It's just the request that's being made or the element that's making a request. So really it's just, if you have a form, it's a post, but there's other things you can have on your HTML that are GET requests, or like we're going to have a button that eventually that has like edit, delete, show. So there's gonna be like a lot of things we can do with it. So the HTML is super versatile, and it itself is not the HTTP kind of method. It is the request that we're making. And so in this case, when we click the button for the form, that's us making a request to my server, and the type is post. When we click this button, again, we're making a request to my server, but its type is GET because we're not sending any information, right? It's just rerouting us.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, does that make sense, Jeffrey?
Yes, it does.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else have any other questions?
No, it was definitely a lot,
Yeah,
but it kind of just shows us what we're about to get into. So,
yep. But the good news is we've got, this is week 1 of CRUD in like full stack. We've got 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and then the belt exam opens. So we're gonna be doing the same thing for the next 6 weeks. And so what we'll do is we're gonna build out CRUD. So create and read today, or create and read this week, sorry. Then we will have read and update or sorry, update and delete next week. And then we'll start again. And we're going to create we're going to go a little bit quicker, or I'll come with it a little pre-built to where we can have relationships. So a one-to-many relationship that we can build out. And then we're going to, with that, have some validations, login and reg, and then we have an entire week just to prep and practice. So you have plenty of time. It is a lot at the beginning. This is always the most like busy week because read and update or update and delete are super easy. It's just kind of getting the setup, but it's not as fun.
We're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, it's good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions, Kevin? You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'll stop the recording here.